we have a problem with this term globalization, because what we see going on in the world is really two globalizations, not one. It's presented as a unitary phenomenon, and it's usually presented as, you know, the corporations, McDonald's, Nike, that kind of thing. And what we say is there's two globalizations. There's the globalization of the elites, and these lines, if you unpack them, you know, here's the United States, here's, pick your country. The country I did my doctoral dissertation on was U.S. policy in South Africa, and this is the nonverbal theory of international relations. This was drawn in the dirt with a stick for me by a South African guy a couple of decades ago, and he said, look, you know, I went over there to try and help, quote unquote. He said, if you want to help, go back and change your country, because it's the lack of real democracy in your country that allows your elites to support the white minority, 14% of the population, with all sorts of weaponry and oil and financing and votes in the UN and vetoing sanctions and all that. So if you really want to help, what you should do is you should sever these linkages between your elite and our elite and build linkages between the grassroots here and the grassroots in the United States. And it was a revelation for me, because I was going out using the nation state as the unit of analysis. And that's in fact the way most newspapers portray the world, and the World Bank literature, the corporate literature. It says the United States did this, and Russia did that, and South Africa did that, Israel did this. But it's not really like that. It's these folks up here, right, the generals, the corporate officials, and the politicians. They're the ones who are making the rules and enacting NAFTA and signing us on to the WTO, even though they didn't read the documents about what the WTO is, etc., that link the elites transnationally. So you have a transnational alliance of elites, which I would call elite globalization, and then you have a transnational alliance of grassroots forces, which for purposes of convenience I'll just call people's globalization. And I think we see, most of what I'm going to talk about is the latter, whoops, can't spell, globalization. I want to talk mostly about unpacking these lines. It's a message of hope. I call it an evangelizer. It comes from the Greek word it means to bring good news. The good news is that this is the future. This people's globalization, the grassroots, global justice, global environment, global peace movement, feminist movement, etc., that's the future. And if you unpack the ideology of these two globalizations, you will find that we're in a paradigm shift, a period of paradigm shift. The value package of the elite globalization, which has dominated the planet for the last 500 years, is money values, right? Columbus, Cortez, Pizarro, what were they coming for? Silver and gold, money values, you know, capitalism. Violence, everything from 500 years ago, mounting cannons on sailing ships, to the recent use of depleted uranium that has poisoned Iraq forever, basically, hundreds of millions of years. And the self-justifying mythology God is on our side. In the early Spanish conquering literature, they use the term infidels to refer to the Native Americans. And you see Al-Qaeda uses infidels to justify killing innocent civilians here. Which is interesting because fundamentalist Islam, fundamentalist Christianity, and fundamentalist Judaism all come from the same roots, from a tradition that says, you will not kill, thou shalt not kill. And this is in the basic ideological program of their founding documents. It's the voice of God saying, you will not do this. And there's no comma, there's no parentheses unless you got a good excuse. You know, unless you can call them infidels or collateral damage. Okay? And I was in a debate recently on a TV show with a Republican guy, and I raised this, and he said, oh, well, if you look at the Aramaic and the way it's really translated, it's not kill, it's murder. And I was like, okay, so don't kill me, but you can murder me. You know what? It's a distinction without a difference, right? So this is the old paradigm that's dying. It's in its death throes. The Sotho people in South Africa say dying bull kicks the hardest. So whereas we're depressed by this violence that's being done by the empire, it's the sign of final stages. And if you look at biological systems, when you get erratic volatility in the system, that's usually the point where it's going to break into something different. it's reaching some kind of transition point. And I would argue that the value package of the people's globalization movement, if you boil it down, if you render it down, cook out all the fat, what you get is life values, that is human rights and the environment, the life cycle rather than the money cycle, nonviolence, a very profound nonviolence, a very scholarly and thoughtful and philosophical and spiritual and training camp, etc. nonviolence. And God does not take sides in intra-species conflicts. Whatever your conceptualization of God, or you reject the concept completely, or you see it as the creative force of the universe, or the Big Bang, or whatever, it's not going to take sides in an intra-species conflict. When black ants and red ants fight, is a supreme being going to take sides in that? You know, come on, give me a break. But does not take sides in intra-species conflicts. It's such a narrow, small conception of a supreme being. The creator of all things, visible and invisible, is going to come down into the muck of these idiots. I'm going to kill you. Really? Yeah, well, I really pity you. If that's your version of God, I don't want any part of that, okay? I always had, even though I was raised Catholic in a very uptight church, our conceptualization of the creator of all things, visible and invisible, was a little bit bigger than, oh yeah, God's going to take sides. He's rooting for the Redskins or the 49ers, or, you know, it's, oh, so it's just like a sport? Is that what this is? Or it's warfare? And, you know, the notion that I can exterminate someone who has a different opinion than me, you can kill hate by killing the hater. No, you in fact create more hate, right? So, in this struggle, in this historical transition from the old dominant paradigm to a new paradigm, we can unpack this movement and see sub-movements that are in themselves very large. For example, the corporate accountability movement within, and I want to lay out three. Corporate accountability movement would be one. We just finished a book on the corporate accountability movement where we go back to the Boston Tea Party, right? It was corporate property destruction is what it was. It was like $1 million worth of tea that they dumped in Boston Harbor. Corporate accountability movement, the democratized global government movement. This would be the movement around the World Bank, IMF, World Trade Organization, who are in the process of writing a constitution for the planet. It's the final stage of constitutional development at a planetary level. And then the alternative economy movement is the last thing I want to talk about, and that's what I want to talk about most. Because if you're going to critique corporate capitalism, you have to have a replacement. You can't just say it sucks, the boat is sinking, well, where do people jump off that boat to? There has to be another boat, and that boat is being built. Corporate accountability movement, within the corporate accountability movement, you got these huge movements like the anti-sweatshop movement. The anti-sweatshop movement went out and just in the United States alone forced over 100 universities, UW I think is one of them, to sign on to the Workers' Rights Consortium. Right? They're saying, we reject the notion that either that corporations are just going to go to other countries and set up these sweatshops and exploit workers in China and Saipan and other places and not be accountable to the public. And we reject attempts by the Clinton administration to set up a kind of ameliorative fig leaf that's going to say, oh, you know, we'll give you a sweat-free label if you agree to let people have bathroom breaks. But they wouldn't talk about wages. Whenever we were in those meetings, we'd always raise the issue of wages. And no, we can't talk about wages. Well, if you're not going to talk about wages, then you're not serious. Because if you're talking about workers' rights, you have to talk about living wage. And if a living wage isn't being paid. My question always in the sweatshop movement to people that oppose us was, would you want your sister or your daughter to work in there? And if not, then you shouldn't be buying that product and you shouldn't be investing in that company. Because if you don't agree with that, then you're saying there's two kinds of people in the world. There's them and there's us. And you've then rejected all the fundamental Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All people, they didn't say all Americans, they said all men. But they meant all people are created equal and they are endowed by the Creator with inalienable rights. It's the second sentence of the Declaration of Independence. Inalienable rights mean that you cannot give them up voluntarily, and they cannot be taken away from you. They are built into you. They are natural rights. God bless Rousseau, you know. This is a fundamental step forward for humanity, and we can take some credit for it. It was Africans who taught me to respect the history of my own country by saying, look, dude, we know better than you the bad foreign policies of your country. We're here suffering the effects. But don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Sure, criticize the bad parts of your country, but grab onto the good stuff and hang on to it, because there's people within your own country who want to destroy it. And right now we see the U.S. Constitution under attack. You know, Fourth Amendment's already pretty much shot full of holes. You know, illegal search and seizure, hello. That's why I think we need to be having a dialogue with our brothers in you know, the gun crowd who are into the Second Amendment. It is part of the Constitution, and we need to defend all parts of the Constitution. I think we need to set up an organization called the Well-Regulated Militia Network. Yeah? The Well-Regulated Militia Network, and it would promote nonviolence, right? That would be one of the basic principles of it, and defend the Constitution, because those people are constitutionalists. I've talked with a lot of them, and we might disagree on immigration and abortion and racism and a lot of other things, but I'm protecting the Constitution. It's my fallback position when I do right-wing radio and you get the call in who says, this guy sounds like a communist, send him back to Baghdad where he came from, you know. You can't hang up. You got to talk to that guy, and the place of contact is the Constitution. Do you believe in the Constitution? Do you defend the Constitution in the United States? And 99 times out of 100, that guy's going to say, yeah, when I was in the Marines, I swore allegiance to the Constitution. Fine. Then we have a point of unity, because I'm really worried about the Constitution right now, and the fact that it's under attack. And if they trash the U.S. Constitution, we're screwed. We're screwed. If you look at what the Nazis did in 1941, they removed the citizenship of German Jews, and once your citizenship is taken away, they can do anything they want to you. If you don't have citizenship rights, they can put you in concentration camps, they can do anything they want to you, and you have no legal basis. We currently have 2 American citizens who are being held without habeas corpus, without right to a jury, without right to a trial, without right to contact with their family. We had an American citizen murdered by the CIA in Yemen. Okay? Is it legal for the U.S. government to murder a U.S. citizen without a trial? It's bad enough when they do it with a trial, but without a trial, it's totally illegal and unconstitutional. And they've already done that. The Bush administration has already done that. And they're getting away with it because we're letting them get away with it. It's our fault. Ultimately, it's our fault. The second area, let me just say, to wrap up here on corporate accountability movement, we just finished this book, Insurrection. It's going to come out in September. It's about corporate accountability struggles. And we go through all these case studies. And we feel like we have some credibility on this stuff because we don't just study it as scholars. We're also involved in Nike and anti-sweatshop stuff, the lawsuit against over 20 companies for their practices in Saipan. It took 3 years, but we forced them to cough up $20 million to the workers that they had screwed out of their overtime pay. There have been some significant achievements in this movement, but if you sum it all up and look at it, especially the victories, it's not enough. Because at the end of the day, you made this corporation be a little less harmful to the environment, you made this corporation be a little bit nicer to its workers, but the system is still there. So it amounts to end-of-pipeline politics. We're standing outside the factory at the end of the pipeline trying to deflect damage against people in the environment. And that's not enough. We've got to get inside the factory to change the nature of the machinery so it's not putting out any effluent. Zero waste. Right? That's what should be coming out the tailpipe. Nothing. Okay? It's like they say with automobiles. You want to fix automobiles, you take the exhaust pipe and you put it into the cabin of the car. And then you redesign the engine to make that okay. That's all. Real simple. So you take the entire exhaust pipe of the industrial capitalist model and you stick it right back into your mouth. And then say, okay, how do you make that so it's not going to kill you? Because currently it is killing us. It's destroying systems. So what we come up with in the conclusion of that book is, and I'm not putting down corporate accountability struggles. We just launched this Ford campaign. So it's not like we think these things are a waste. It's just you have to understand they are tactical struggles. They are not, you're not going to get a strategic victory. You're going to get some ameliorative step that's a transit point towards something else. And in the process, you can learn about how to pressure corporations and sharpen up our tactics, build alliances. The first thing we always do in a corporate accountability campaign is say, what other groups are we going to work with? So the Ford campaign, you'll see Rainforest Action Network's logo is on there because we're doing it with them, because they're friends of ours in San Francisco. They've got a great record. That, you know, they have the same perspective as us, et cetera. And Ford might know who they are because they hammered Mitsubishi and Home Depot for years and caused them, you know, a lot of grief. And what we come up with in the conclusion of the book is we try and lay out what we think are some systemic solutions, like going after corporate charters, federal charting, and eventually international chartering of corporations. Perhaps a constitutional amendment, 7 words, a corporation is not a human being. Because in a public debate, there's nobody that can get up and argue that a corporation is a human being. One of the ideas that we're pushing is, if you look at the history of separation of church and state, it took centuries of abuses of church and state being together, Holy Roman Empire, Church of England, all of that, before people finally realized, look, we have to constitutionally create a firewall between church and state. Well, now we're realizing we need separation of corporations from the state.
Yes.
Because we have an institution that has taken over our government. So that means end corporate welfare, end the revolving door of employment. They go in and work for government for a few years, get up this great Rolodex, then go to work for Boeing to sell weapons to the, you know, it's a scam, and it's well documented. Everybody knows it. It's not a secret anymore, right? You can get this information if you want to, especially now with the internet. End corporate welfare, it's 3 times the size of poor people welfare. Campaign finance reform, full public financing of campaigns. I like Jim Hightower's idea. He says members of Congress should be just like NASCAR drivers. They should wear jumpsuits with decals of the corporations on their suit. And the bigger the money they get, the bigger the deep. So you can say, oh, there's the senator from Boeing, and there's the senator from Exxon. And it would be very obvious, right? And we could do that. You know, we laugh, but we could do that because they work for us. They're public employees. We are the boss. They are the employee. Just like the public airwaves. We're the landlord. These corporations like CNN and NBC, they are the tenant. And they don't pay any rent. What rent they do pay is insignificant. So we need to flip that in people's consciousness and make them realize we are the boss. Bush is our public servant. He lives in public housing. It's nice public housing, but it's public housing nonetheless. And we own it. And instead, they've created this consciousness of sheep. Oh, don't raise your voice, Kevin. You might get put on that list. You want to be on that list. You want to be at the top of that list. So if they come to your door, you can give them such a rash of you-know-what that maybe they'll leave your neighbors alone. Because you remember the quote, I even have a T-shirt that has it on the back. Reverend Niemeyer in Germany said, when they came for the communists, I was not a communist. So I didn't stand up. When they came for the Jews, I was not a Jew. So I didn't stand up. When they came for the trade unionists, I was not a trade union. And by the time they came for me, there was nobody to stand up in solidarity with me. So we either learn from that history or we're going to see the same mistakes. And I think you could make a very sound argument that we are in a sort of pre-fascist political context here where we have a president who is not a legally elected constitutional president. It was a stolen election, waging illegal wars that are creating more enemies and more recruits for Al-Qaeda. And everybody on the left says that, and you think George Bush and those guys don't know that? They know that. And that's okay with them, because they have to have a credible threat to keep us all quiet and down and spending all this military money. It's just like you had the Cold War with the Soviets. Ooh, they're going to take over the world. Yeah, oh, they were so powerful they collapsed of their own undemocratic weight. That's interesting. But the function of that domestically, of that external threat, is to keep everybody down. Oh, don't raise your voice. Hello? You know, that's not what this country was founded on. The principle, the core principle, is that sovereignty, which means ultimate political authority, ultimate political power, resides not in Congress, not in the President, not in the Supreme Court, not in the Constitution, but in the people. And that's why the Constitution starts with those 3 magic words, we the people. And that's the piece we need to save. that sovereignty, ultimate political authority in this system is in us. And the biggest defect in recognizing that is us, our own consciousness of having allowed people in power to convince us that we shouldn't rule the country. Half the population doesn't even vote in the major presidential elections, right? So we need to point the finger of responsibility back at ourselves. Second, to democratize the global state, democratize the global government. This movement managed to make history several years ago here in Seattle by, for the first time ever, stopping a World Trade Ministers meeting in its tracks where they came together for 4 days, and at the end of it they had nothing. Nothing. Not one piece of paper, not one statement. They had made up umbrellas and pens and all this stuff. The Seattle Round. You notice you don't hear that phrase. Sorry. I mean, I really apologize to your tourism industry on the money you lost and whatever, the glamour, but it didn't happen. The reason it didn't happen is because 50,000 some odd people, and some of them were very odd, came together, ignored their differences, which were many. You know, when you got people dressed as butterflies and steel workers with fingers that got chopped off, you know, walking around together with their arms around each other, something's going on, okay? You know, when the transgender people and the dock workers are hanging out together, there's something happening that's not your ordinary political process. Well, think about this. How does nature operate? Nature operates, one of nature's fundamental principles is unity of diversity. Unity of diversity. Nature does not do monocropping. You know, all that when you drive across the Midwest and you see corn for 3 days and wheat for 5 days and pigs for another 2 days. You know, nature doesn't do that, okay? That requires human intervention with poison, with toxins, to suppress the other forms of life that would naturally spring forth. What nature does is the rainforest, or your backyard. If you just let it go, it's kind of like, well, my backyard, don't throw me in there, I'll never come out, you know? But that's how nature operates, unity of diversity. Well, it's the same in political policy making, right? We, here in the United States, are the most diverse country, not only now, but ever in world history. And the country is run and controlled by old, rich, white, male corporate lawyers. White male millionaire corporate lawyers, are they like a big percentage of the population? You know, it's like if somebody proposed, let's have lesbian carpenters run the country. You know, you'd say, you know, with all due respect to lesbian carpenters, it's a small percentage of the population. White male millionaire corporate lawyers are not a big percentage of the population, right? So a monocrop of policymakers must silence the other voices, the diverse voices of life that would normally spring up. And that do spring up, and that's why they have to use tear gas. Whenever an institution has to send out well-armed police to silence the public, that's a regime that's not powerful, that's a regime that's weak, very weak, and getting weaker all the time. Because as we saw back in mid-February when over 10 million people globally, it was the biggest ever expression of public morality ever in world history, and Bush referred to it as a focus group. Focus group? I'm a sociologist. I know what a focus group is. It's like 10 or 20 people, okay? It's not 11 million. That's not a focus group. So you're wrong again, George. You know, read a book once in a while. But the importance of this movement, of the World Bank, IMF, WTO movement, is people are starting to understand we are in a constitutional moment. They are writing a constitution for the entire planet. And what they are saying is that money values should have priority over life values. That life values, human rights, labor rights, the environment, should be subordinated to money values. And the money cycle, $1, $2, $3, you know, you got X amount of dollars, 1, 2X, 3X, 4X, it's math, okay? It's real simple. Life values are a little bit more complex. And what we're saying in the movement is, no. Money values, commerce, must be subordinated to life values. If you go out in the street and you ask 100 people out on the street, which is sacred, commerce or life? Most people know life is sacred. Commerce is just an activity like sport, religion, entertainment, sex. Sex might be in a separate category all the time, but you get what I mean, right? It's just an activity, it's not sacred. Life is sacred. And every culture, it's one of the universals. In every culture, there is a recognition of the sanctity of life. And what you will find, if you go back in the history of different cultures, the commercial sector was always viewed with suspicion. Keep them under control because all they care about is money. Thomas Jefferson in the early 1800s said, we should crush in its birth, these are his words, we should crush in its birth the aristocracy of the moneyed corporations who already bid defiance to our government. Because already in the early 1800s, the corporations were starting to try and take over the government. And if you go to the Jefferson Memorial in Washington, my favorite quote, they've got all these quotes of him chiseled in the marble. The best quote is up inside the rotunda. You have to turn around backwards to read it. You must fall over. And he says, on the altar of God, I pledge undying hostility to any government restriction on the free minds of the people. The free minds of the people was the bedrock of democracy. And look at what we've got going on now. Weapons of mass destruction. That's the justification. Weapons of... Well, where are they now? Colin, you know all those photos you had of the weapons of mass destruction? It should be easy to find them, right? Because you had those satellite photos. Where are they? They pulled out the team that was looking for it. There's no big announcement. The American public haven't been told by Fox and CNN, oh yeah, you know what, that was a big lie, okay? So that we could wreck that country, the cradle of civilization. Babylon, Tigris, Euphrates, Mesopotamia, Hammurabi, law codes, origination of all sorts of basic aspects of human civilization. And we just destroyed it. We wrecked it. We turned it into chaos. And it looks more chaotic every day to me. We should be ashamed. We should really be ashamed. But shame is a good motivator. If you look at the successful nonviolent revolutions, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa, it was a combination of shame and law. Shame mobilizes the human consciousness to realize the need to come together collectively and change law, because law codifies a different set of values. And then it becomes the authority and is enforced by the state. So that's the challenge. Can we create a democratic global government that obviously would be a federation of local authorities where people can actually get control? You know, like in San Francisco, the guy who's head of our board of supervisors is Matt Gonzalez, a Latino guy who's a Green Party guy. You know, and he's head of the board of supervisors. Yeah, so I can call him up. I can get access to him. You know, he's a man of the people. At the local level is where we're going to stop the undemocratic money values global government, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. The latter part that I want to focus on, the alternative economy, I think it's kind of a point for self-criticism on the left, that a lot of us come out of a Marxist tradition, or we're exposed to Marxism, where Karl Marx talked about control over the means of production. And Marxists talked and talked and talked about it and didn't do it, right? Any notion that we should generate our own revenue by creating enterprises to create replacement products and services for what the corporations are offering up was, dude, what are you, a capitalist, Kevin? You want to do business? What, are you going to have your little corner store or something? You know, it was always looked down on. And I think part of it was because we were intellectuals. We were book writers, we were artists, you know, we came out of a college-educated tradition. So the notion of doing business, and we confused the critique of capitalism with the production of necessary goods and services. Because let's face it, even though we overconsume and, you know, we got too much waste and all this commodity affluence in this country, I don't know about here, but in San Francisco, people have to do garage sales each week to make room in the garage for new crap they're going to buy. You know, they had to go out and sell the old crap that they bought a few weeks ago, and it's this treadmill they're on, you know, like, ooh, psycho kitty, you know, it's something weird. Fine, have that critique, but recognize the fact that human beings need a certain amount of goods and services. During the Nike campaign, over 90% of the calls that came into our office were like this: hey, I agree with you that Nike sucks. What shoes do I buy? And there wasn't a shoe we could name that wasn't produced in sweatshops. Now there's Issue, there's a couple of companies that are somewhat better. New Balance isn't quite as bad, but there's none that you can say, well, if the movement really had its act together, we would have prepared before that Nike campaign by developing a shoe company that would produce in a non-sweatshop factory without environmental negative impact, so that when people called up, we'd say, oh, baby, we got the shoe for you. And that's smart business. It's like political marketing. You go, rah, 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 rah. You educate the public about this stuff is bad, and here's the replacement. So if you compare what happened in the Nike campaign to what happened in the Fair Trade Coffee campaign, we had an international system that started in the 60s. Now it's this full-blown international system. It's called FLO, Fair Trade Labeling Organizations. FLO. It's in all the industrial countries, and it includes over 550,000 coffee farmers in the global south. When they sell their coffee beans into the Fair Trade Network, they get a minimum price of $1.26 a pound. If it's organic, they get $1.40. The current world market price is about 45 cents. And that's not what the farmer gets. The farmer gets about 30 or 25, because that's what the truck driver gets who delivers it to the port. The truck driver, the peasants don't have trucks. The guy shows up with a truck and he says, I'll give you 30 cents a pound. The farmer says, wait a minute, I heard on the radio there was 45 cents a pound. And the truck driver says, yeah, we'll sell it to the radio then. You know, I'm here with the truck. You want to sell your beans or not? And of course, all the beans are coming on harvest at the same time. The price is depressed. Whereas the fair trade movement not only pays a higher price, and it's a guaranteed floor price. If the world market price goes above $1.26, the price goes up as well. People get access to credit. They get technical assistance going organic. They get help forming co-ops. They get help building schools, clinics. So we take people out on reality tours, and we take them to the plantation that's in the capitalist market, and then we take them to the fair trade co-op. And people can see physically with their own eyes and hear it from the mouths of the people. We don't have to say anything. Say, just talk to these people, talk to these people. These people, the whole family, are going out with their kids in a plantation in some place like Guatemala or Nicaragua. If they work all day really hard, they can maybe make $3. And those kids don't have shoes on. There's poison snakes and poison spiders. Right? The kids are getting bit. Those kids should be in school. Not only have shoes, but they should be in school. And we were doing the pressure campaign on Starbucks. We said, we're going to go to the media, and we're going to propose an exchange between the children of your Starbucks executives in Seattle and the children of the Guatemalan coffee pickers. And when the media comes to you and says, is this true that you're going to do an exchange with Global Exchange with the kids? You're going to have to say no, and you're going to have to answer their question, why not? You're willing to make a lot of money and be very affluent off of the exploitation of those children, but you wouldn't let your children, quote unquote, your children, be under those conditions. All the children in the world are our children. It's not just the two who live in my house that I write checks for almost every day, it seems. You know, the open palm trick. Hey, can you fill in? You know, it's all the children of the planet. And until we feel that intensely, we're not going to solve these problems, because ultimately it comes down to consciousness. And do we feel connected to people, or do we say, well, the other, you know, it's their fault. They had too many babies. They're too stupid. They're lazy. They didn't work, you know, all that. So in the fair trade coffee movement, when we went to coffee companies to say, look, what you're doing is wrong, there was some alternative we could point to say that's right. And the Achilles heel of these companies was to say, look, if we go to your customers and say to your customers, are you willing to pay an extra 2 cents a cup if we guarantee that that 2 cents will go to the farmers that produce the beans that made that latte for you this morning? Most of your customers, 99%, are going to go, sure, 2 cents, are you kidding me? Right? This is easy, easy, easy to get people to say, oh, between this and this, I'll take this. People will take the better alternative if we create it, if we organize it. So when we do these corporate campaigns, or when we do a pressure campaign against the World Trade Organization or whatever, we've got to be conscious of the alternative. The good news about the anti-World Trade Organization movement is that there is an alternative now. It's called the Earth Charter. If you go to earthcharter.org, you will see it. People took over 10 years going around the world to over 100 countries, soliciting the input of people, what should be in this basic document, and they merged the human rights of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the environmental insights which were left out of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and they merged them together. It's the life values constitution. It's all the basic principles we need to construct an entirely different system, a democratic, life-affirming system on this planet. So now the World Trade Organization isn't out there as a monopoly on its own, the only constitution. We got this other one. And I'm not saying it has to be exactly the form of the Earth Charter, but it's a damn good foundation. I like it. I tend to be a critical reader. I read a lot, and I'm an editor. I'm looking for mistakes and stuff I can disagree with. It's a very well-written document. It's well-crafted. So, in the alternative economy movement, we've got fair trade organizations like our stores. We have 3 stores, 2 physical stores, 1 online. The online store, over the past 2 years, sales have increased 80% per year. That's at a time when the retail market is flat. Most of these big corporate retail places are going, oh yeah, we got a Kmart. He went bankrupt. I love it. There is justice in the world. You know, Martin Luther King said that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. You know, and we have to tap into the power of that kind of thinking. This system is unsustainable, and our job now is not so much yelling at people, your boat is sinking. A lot of people know it. We got to build that alternative boat. If we pull up alongside the Titanic with a cool boat, with a party going on deck, scantily clad people with drinks in their hand and good music, people will jump happily. We don't have to keep doing that. System sucks, system sucks. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt. We know the system sucks. What are we going to replace it with? Fair trade labeling, right? All you got to do is look for this symbol, this rectangular symbol, black and white stick figure holding scales of justice, fair trade certified. Pretty simple. If you see that on the coffee, tea, chocolate, you know that there's an international monitoring system that ensured that the workers were paid a living wage and that there were certain conditions that were met by that production system. They can be improved, and they're being improved all the time, and I know because I'm involved in this stuff. There's a lot of wrangling and debate and all, but it is getting better all the time. So you tell people, look, this is something you can do every time you go in to get a cup of coffee or buy beans in any kind of store. You say, do you have fair trade certified beans? And they go, huh? Oh, wow, you don't know about fair trade certified beans? And you can get the information off our website. It's real simple, 10 things you can do to support fair trade coffee, fair trade chocolate, fair trade tea, etc. And it's expanding now to where people are saying, well, look, if we've got an insignia label, what would be the next step? Because an insignia is great, but it requires people knowing what that insignia means. What if we had a content label? And we're going to start a line of global exchange products. And we're going to put content labeling on it, saying, what was the social history? What was the environmental history of this product? Right? What did the workers get paid? What was the impact on the environment? It's like nutrition labeling. It empowers the consumer to read and know what was the history of this commodity. It wasn't for no reason that Karl Marx began his magnum opus, Capital, the 3 volumes of Capital, with the mystery of the commodity form. The commodity form. If you unpack the commodity form, most of these commodities that we wear and use, if they could speak the injustice and the environmental harm that is embodied in that commodity, we would freak out. Most of our life wouldn't be able to be lived. We wouldn't be able to touch stuff. We'd be so freaked out by it, right? By the daily horrors that are put up with by people less fortunate than ourselves. And the fact that we are fortunate is a biological roll of the dice. Any of us could have been born in an African village, wherever. I mean, that's just fortune, right? It's a total roll of the dice. Eco-labeling, other forms of labeling, you see this whole movement progressing. That's a huge movement. That's just one of these pieces. It's just one of the threads of this big rope that is being built, connecting, bridging people in the global south. Socially responsible investing is now hundreds of billions of dollars. It's approaching the $1 trillion mark. And socially responsible, environmentally responsible investing is now outperforming the major corporate indexes like the Russell 2000, the Standard & Poor's 500, the Dow. You know, there's a book by Peter Camejo on why, it's a whole book, statistical stuff, why socially responsible investing now outperforms the non-screened funds. And it's growing. It's on a growth curve like this. Renewable energy, if you look at the data on renewable energy, you will see that the production costs of solar and wind energy are going like this, and burning fossil fuels and nuclear are going like this. Coal and wind are now at the same point. Wind is down to the same production costs as coal, and it will soon be less expensive than coal. When you reach that point, capital starts to shift. Because capital doesn't care what the product is. It could be napalm, wind energy, hula hoops, bean bags. They don't care. It's about where am I going to make money. And when this curve hits the right spot, capital starts to shift. So you'll see places like Silicon Valley where money that used to go into computer stuff is now going into renewable energy. You know, you see a shift going on. Community-supported agriculture, another big piece of this alternative economy movement. You go back 15 years, there was no community-supported agriculture in the United States. Now it's taken off like a rocket. There's something like 500 of them. And what it is a few dozen families contract a farmer directly, say, you produce for us, you cut Safeway, all that middleman, right out of the middle. No advertising, none of that is needed. And the farmer knows the price that they're going to get at harvest, at planting time. Now, that's pretty unusual. Right? There's no commodities markets fluctuating the price or anything like that. People are directly connected. They know the food's being grown organically. At harvest time, they can take their kids out to the farm, participate in the harvest, know the farmer. And that's now spreading to other areas where people are saying, look, let's have a direct relationship between consumers and producers. It's what we try to do in our stores. People come in to buy a candle holder, and there's a description of the handicapped group in Kenya that made those candle holders. So they can actually see the human beings, and this is what we want to do with our labeling. Start humanizing the commodities so people understand this stuff is all made by people, right, who have real lives and stories to tell that are interesting that we can learn from. The Tobin tax, another whole international movement to impose a small tax on international financial transactions. Each day in the global economy, there's about $1.5 trillion in currency transactions that don't produce a damn thing. It's all just speculative gambling, right? To give you a sense of the size, the relative size of this, in a week, the global currency markets turn over more money than all global trade in goods do in a year. That's the currency markets in a week, okay? And it's not taxed. If you put a little tiny, like 0.1% tax on that, you would raise hundreds of billions of dollars a year. You would raise enough to wipe out hunger in the first year. Right? That's how much money we're talking about. We're talking about a tiny tax. And I want to see these banks defend themselves when we go out as a public movement and say, hey, we all pay 15, 20, 30, 35% tax. You don't pay any on this transnational movement of capital that you're doing, speculating against our, you see where the dollar's going these days, right? It's tanking. And these guys are all making money off it. The dollar declined 23% over the past 12 months against the euro. Now, that's going to hurt some people in this country. The currency speculators, they make money whichever way it goes, right? Because they're betting on those movements. The Tobin tax movement growing rapidly. And that's actually, if you want to protect some of your money, change your dollars into euros, because that's probably going to continue for at least the next 4 or 5 years. Alternative models of ownership. We have in the United States 6.5% of the U.S. economy is nonprofit organizations. Cooperatives, there's 47,000 cooperatives in the United States. Worker-owned businesses, where workers own the majority of the company. And that's spreading as well. People saying, why should we work for somebody whose interests are against us when we can control it ourselves? And people figuring out ways. There's whole communities. There's a community in Northern California where the people of the town got together and bought the town. They bought all the land in the town. So that you can't get a Walmart, you can't get this colonial corporate intrusion because the people actually own the town and they control it. They don't just vote and elect a mayor and all. They're actually the owners of the town. Interesting concept. You now have thousands of micro-enterprise organizations that make small loans to poor entrepreneurs. Woman buys a cow, she sells milk on the street corner, it's mostly women. Buy tools, sell your services. In the Grameen Bank in Bangladesh now has Grameen Phone, where they jump over that level of technology of telephone wires and telephone poles to cellular. And I know there are problems with cellular, but still, if you have a cell phone out in the village and the government official comes in and is messing with people, or there's a medical emergency, or the landlord is messing with you, you can call for backup, right? And it's a simple process. You know, you charge 10 cents for the call, and 1 cent goes to the woman who's the entrepreneur who bought it, the other 9 cents goes to pay off the phone, etc. You will hear leftists criticize micro-enterprise lending, usually picking out, you know, if you look at all the 2,000 and some micro-enterprise lending groups, it goes from very radical to very reformist, co-opted, etc., just another form of banking. The thing is, it's very easy for us college-educated, affluent people in the North to pick apart institutional models in the global South, and, oh, it's just another form of capitalism. For the people whose kids are going to eat because of it, you can't put it down. I've been in villages where we come in and say, we want to buy $5,000 worth of your whatever to sell in our stores, and people just go, oh my God, because they know their kids are going to eat for the next 6 months. So we shouldn't minimize, yeah, we can have criticisms of it, but we should do it in a comradely way of trying to move that model forward, not saying, that won't work. You know, I'm really sick of these dilettantes who are like writers. You never see them out in the street, and they write all these critiques, you know? And it's like, dude, you know, you're a really great writer, but I never see you out at the demonstrations. Why is that, you know? Alternative communities like Gaviotas, Kerala in India. Kerala with twice the population density of India, but much better social statistics, because they implemented policies decades ago that did female literacy, fair price stores for basic food commodities, etc., etc. New trade unions, where you have people within the trade union movement now who understand you have to organize transnationally, because the enemy, quote unquote, your adversary is a transnational institution, transnational corporations. So if you're not organizing internationally, you're not going to deal with that. They understand that they have to make social alliances. I'm not saying all trade unions. It's a mixed bag. The smarter ones. I had a woman come over the other day to meet with me from the steelworkers. She's their environmental outreach coordinator from the steelworkers. Oh yeah. Within the trade union movement now, who understand you have to organize transnationally, because the enemy, quote unquote, your adversary is a transnational institution, transnational corporations. So if you're not organizing internationally, you're not going to deal with that. They understand that they have to make social alliances. I'm not saying all trade unions. It's a mixed bag. The smarter ones. I had a woman come over the other day to meet with me from the steelworkers. She's their environmental outreach coordinator from the steelworkers. Oh yeah, that's great. And she says, look, we can do political stuff together, but if you guys want to do your health plan as part of us, we got 500,000 members or whatever it is. Hey, that's good for me as a little nonprofit group. So there's ways we can help each other in addition to going out in the streets and protest. And also there is an element within the trade union movement that's realizing that their retirement funds, trillions of dollars, could be a very powerful force for influencing these corporations if we can get worker control of those funds. This is something the elite did to make sure the trade unions, oh no, you can't control it, right? Take it away, put it under management's control. But people are working on that. Now, none of these individually is a revolution in itself, right? They are all tactically focused on a particular area of change. So when anybody makes a critique, and it particularly irks me when leftists do this, oh, that fair trade coffee stuff, that's just it. You can say that about any one of these things I've mentioned. They're just fingers. But the fingers are starting to come together. Okay? And that's where you get systemic change. That's where you get an alternative system. And if you look at it, and this is where most of my work is now, green economy movement, trying to create events like the Green Festival. It's a thing we did. This is for this year's Green Festival. We're doing two, one in San Francisco, one in Austin in the fall. October 11th and 12th in Austin, November 8th and 9th in San Francisco. This is a report on the one that we did last year. It's a hybrid event. where we bring together about 250 green enterprises, big hall, 100,000 square feet. You bring together all these green economy companies, the fair trade coffee, the recycled plastic, the wind energy, the working assets, Mother Jones, publications, publishers, all these different people with this life values, nonviolence, God does not take sides ideology, and say, we are now at the stage where we not only have solar energy companies, we have solar energy associations and wind energy associations and associations of socially responsible investors. That's secondary level. Now tertiary level is linking those into an alternative system. So the next stage that I'm working on after at the Green Festival, we had 13,000 people come in over a Saturday, Sunday. And it's a hybrid event of the trade show of the economy, and then about 40, 50 speakers all talking about what's the alternative system. Not system sucks, man, you know, that yammering stuff, but what's the alternative that we're going to replace corporate capitalism with? And the place was charged with energy. People were just bouncing. And so many people come up to me and they say, oh man, this is so great. How often can you do this? And usually the answer is once a year, because it takes about 12 months to plan it and get it all together. You need 200 volunteers. You've got to raise about $350,000. The event raises about 70 or 80% of that, but I have to go out and raise the rest. But then I started thinking, well, how often could you do it? The answer is every day. Because if you had a permanent eco-mall, Green Mart, right? Go right up against Walmart and say, here, come in this place and there's a food court, right? I mean, there's the little diagram of it, the Global Citizen Center, the floor plan. We got the finance person who's going to finance the first one. Deep in the place, you got a food court with a cafe, restaurant. At night, there's events, there's speakers, music, dancing. You bring in different constituencies. You bring in elders and the hip-hop kids on the same night. So you cross-fertilize those constituencies, right? And these companies will pay to have their stuff there, right? And, you know, the solar guy in Santa Rosa or Working Assets or whoever, they can't afford a retail store just for themselves, but they can afford a 5x5 space or a 10x10 space, and they'll pay you monthly rent to be there. And then the upper floors are Global Exchange and Mother Jones and Transfair and Ruckus and the Bicycle Coalition and all these groups that we work together anyway. So why not be in the same building where we share photocopying expenses and we do total green architecture on the building? Then you start to get the fingers into a fist. Then you start to be a force that can be reckoned with. And if we can do it in San Francisco, I bet we can do it in Seattle. And I bet we can do it in Portland and Boston and Washington and Buenos Aires and Johannesburg and any major metropolitan area where there's a critical mass of alternative economic institutions whose greatest flaw is they're small. And like all small business, they're undercapitalized. Okay, so each of those fingers is breakable when they come together. It's like 10 pencils. Yeah, individually they're breakable, together they ain't breakable. And you find synergy and cross-fertilization just as you do in a good team of individuals when you team up a whole bunch of companies, of enterprises. And then we start creating a different model of accumulation where the dominant value is not get rich, have a mansion, cocaine habit, 10 BMWs, duh. No, you know, like Philip Knight, the head of Nike, is worth like $6 billion. Phil, what do you do with that money, you know? You could have the biggest coke habit in the world. You'd burn your nose out before you got through the first few $1 million. The only thing you can do with that much money is control other human beings and get away with stuff you shouldn't get away with. And if you've ever seen people around, rich people sucking up to them, you see, it's not good. It's not good for that. If I was rich, I'd never let anybody know about it. Because you'd never know if somebody really liked you for you, or if they were just sucking up to you to get at your money. You know? It happens all the time. You've probably seen it, right? But what these movements are doing that's so radical, if they get brought together, is that they are all raising in their own way the question, and it's a dual question, how does capital get invested? That's the core question of capitalism that remains unexposed to the public mind. How does capital get invested has two pieces. Who's sitting at the table? Right? Is it old, rich, white male corporate lawyers, or is it the diversity that is the human bouquet? And two, what are the values that are governing that capital investment process? Is it maximize profits for big corporations? Or is it meet all social needs, no hungry children, no children without shoes, no homeless, and save the environment. Those are very radically different sets of values. And the general movement of humanity is toward our values. Meet all social needs and save the environment. That's why we can put 10 or 11 million people out on the street on a given day to say no to empire. It doesn't mean it's going to stop Bush, you know, Mr. Focus Group, right? But that is a historical step forward that gives us hope. Because think about it this way. Imagine if we in the global justice movement were a PR firm. And we went to a corporation that was going to launch a new product. And we said, I'll tell you what would you pay if we could put your product on the front page of every newspaper in the world on a given day? You know how much that company would pay for that? We in the movement, we can do that. We can put the World Bank, the WTO, Bush, we can put them on the front page, looking bad, us peeing on their parade, right? On any given day. That is massive power. It's unprecedented in world history. And it's only moving forward because our technology, our shared culture is all progressing. And we're getting closer and closer together and learning how to like each other and learning how to understand how we work with each other, even though we don't agree on everything. You know, you don't even agree 100% with the person you're going to marry. So the person you're going to do politics with, you don't have to agree with them on everything. You just got to find where's the overlap. You know, the Venn diagram, where's the overlap? What do you agree on? So the central strategic question is, how do we build a global mass democratic movement? I stress mass because it's all about mass mobilizing. It's the one tactic we have that the elites will never, they're mass demobilizers. Right? They don't want everybody to stay home and watch their TV. That's the difference between this and German fascism. German fascism was a mass mobilizing regime. There were thugs out in the street. Now, this time, we're the ones out in the street. It's inverted totalitarianism, right? As a recent article in The Nation elaborated very eloquently. So we're in the middle of a paradigm shift to a different set of values, a different kind of world system. It requires long-term vision. I.F. Stone used to say, if you expect an answer to your question during your lifetime, you're not asking a big enough question. And I think that's the consciousness. We need to have emergency heart, fix it yesterday. This is an emergency. We need to get out there and change this stuff. But we need long-term consciousness. And if you think about the Masons who laid the first layer of the Great Wall of China, or those cathedrals that took 400 years to build, they knew they weren't going to see the final product of their work. But they did very precise work because they understood if you're doing the foundation of something, there's going to be a lot of weight come on top of it. And it better be really strong and precise. And that's our historic role right now, to lay the foundation for a future democratically organized global economy with not one hungry child. And that will come about. I have no doubt about it. I'm absolutely certain that will come about. The only question is, how long is it going to take, and how much catastrophe and suffering needs to take place between then and now? And our job is to shorten it and to soften it so that there's less violence and so that it happens as quickly as possible.